debating death and memory, past and present. It's an Archaeodeath debate.
Hey, check this out. Backgrounds and everything. When
Oh,
I'm done.
lovely. I've just got an office. Oh, you're all looking very suitable for an adventure. Off to plunder some foreign land. I mean, to
But
save archaeology for a museum.
Right, yeah. Totally, that's what he's doing.
but in all honesty, you're an archaeologist, so it does make sense that you would be in your office surrounded by archaeological texts.
Right?
Well, I've got
He
my
So
showed
got a
there's
everything
horde
he
of
that.
had to be
students
surrounded
waiting for
by.
me outside. They're all just waiting outside, and I'm just going to climb
I
out the
bet.
window to escape. You know,
I
it's all
bet. A
as
couple of them
happens.
have "I love you" on their eyelids, the whole bit. Um,
Of course.
so, if you've been with us before, you know generally the professor and I, we talk about Doctor Who, the religion and archaeology of, but we have taken a little detour and we've added an anthropologist to our mix today. This is Nerdship Projects, if you haven't met them yet. And we are going to be discussing all things Indiana Jones. Where does it get it right?
I have a disclaimer, just because you know how my brain works. Not yet credentialed.
We're going to be discussing all things Indiana Jones. Where does Indiana Jones get it right? Where does it get it wrong? Where could it have gone instead to make it even better? And how do we feel about the upcoming Dial of Destiny? We are going to go in the movie release order. So we are going to start, of course, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, which will lead us into Temple of Doom. Of course, Last Crusade, and unfortunately, the Crystal Skull. And then, we'll see where we get there from there. As Professor Williams is our resident archaeologist, would you like to start us off, Professor?
Okay, hello everybody. I suppose the starting point to say is that Indiana Jones has defined the early years of archaeology of the 20th century in popular imagination for much of our lifetime since the late 20th century as Hollywood's version of a American adventuring archaeologist grappling with the occult and with ancient civilizations and spiritual engagements and combating Nazis, combating various strange cults in the Indian subcontinent, and generally being a very popular sort of character that's had various spin-offs and from it, and we're sort of anticipating the fifth film after many a hiatus. Obviously, Raiders of the Lost Ark 1981, Temple of Doom 1984. Last Crusade 1989 are the three sort of 80s films, and then we had Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, and an even more antique Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones in the latest version. For me, it's obviously I remember seeing it first at school on my last year at primary school. They showed us Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that was my first introduction long before I became an archaeologist. So it's with us. Archaeologists love to hate it, and they love to love it as well, and they love to joke about it. And it has many different ways we can approach the film as an archaeologist, from thinking about how it does, obviously in a fictional world, does actually embody many of the tropes of what archaeology was about. There's a lot of truth behind the fiction, and not exactly the detail, but in terms of archaeology as a sort of colonial endeavor of competing with other colonial nations to acquire antiquities. And obviously that embodies the 18th, 19th, late 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries. But then, of course, there's lots of fiction that no one would ever claim Indiana Jones. But I always like to say as a joke that, of course, Indiana Jones is a fully accurate rendition of my life.
Of course, absolutely.
That's the only reason we're friends.
Exactly. It's the way it is. I won't deny it.
Okay, when we talk about, for me, of course, I was a kid when Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, and I'm a Jewish kid. So being a Jewish kid who is going to go see this movie about an archaeologist who is hunting down the Beit HaMikdash, for those who don't speak Hebrew, the Ark of the Covenant, was outstanding to me. And it was over the top. just so over the top. The Nazis in it were completely over the top. You know, that the main German character, he was just like, you know, with his hanging up his coat, he was just too much.
Yeah.
Too much. But I remember being a kid and being completely awestruck by this movie in general. So, for both of you, what is the defining factor of Raiders of the Lost Ark for you that made you an Indiana Jones fan?
That's a tough one for me because I didn't see Raiders first.
Oh.
But what I did like about it was, here's this dude who, like, in my head, I was a weird kid, who looked like my dad fighting Nazis. So for me, I was like, he's a cool guy. Okay. Makes no sense now.
I think I think that's good. What about you, Professor? What was and a caveat to this for you specifically, is Indiana Jones the reason why you became an archaeologist?
I haven't really thought about that. No, he probably wasn't. But I think it embodied some of the things that you think of as cool about being an archaeologist. And that includes, regardless of the adventure, it is an adventure. It's an exploration into foreign places, into exotic places, into dangerous places, to uncover secrets, to recover and artifacts that have clues to stories. And that in the base of what archaeology is about, and we cannot deny it, it is about both adventuring and detecting. It's about deciphering and using the silent traces of past civilizations, decoding ancient scripts of, no matter how implausible the portrayal in the films is of those ruins and those sites and those monuments and his practices, at the heart is a core thing that is still with archaeology. And what archaeology is, whether every news item, every new archaeological discovery, it may not be a field discovery, but it's about telling stories of long lost people or ancient peoples or people who may not have lived long ago but can't speak their story for whatever reason, through the traces that are found. So there's the adventuring, but also the detecting, the hidden truth, the mysteries of inner silent things. And I think that is still something that it's not just, and it can be the dead, it can be tombs, it can be temples, it can be other sacred artifacts. It can be, that is, I think, the crux of what it's about. Now, I've also said to you before in conversation that in many ways, of course, one of the things that appeals people to archaeology is that he's not an archaeologist at all. He's a spiritualist, and he's not really doing archaeology. But there is an overlap in popular imagination between what people think archaeologists do and what people think is a spiritual journey of uncovering a deeper truth, in a spiritual sense, about the universe. The first film, it is about realizing his own limits and realizing he should not look upon something that is actually holy, that is actually sacred, and that is actually embodying, and you're led on this journey. You think it's just about fighting Nazis. You actually realize the object is full of those actual properties and so it's kind of that's what appeals to people. That didn't necessarily appeal to me so much, but it's about that journey into discovery of a story that's otherwise hidden.
I think I looked at a little bit of data because I was interested to know. There was an uptick in young people going into university to become archaeologists after Raiders became a hit, because Indiana Jones made archaeology look like the rock star of the natural world. Like, if you become an archaeologist, suddenly women are going to be clamoring to get into your office when you're a professor. You're going to be out, dealing with idols. You're going to be, running away from giant rocks. And there was a literal uptick in how many people started into university and college to study anthropology and archaeology based on this movie franchise. And that is interesting to me. As you and I have discussed before, and certainly Nerdshed and I have discussed before, I do believe that cinema has a way of pulling on people and changing the way we see things, inspiring us, and which is one of the reasons why I'm so attached to cinema the way I am. But when you're a kid, like for Raiders, for me, the definitive moment for me is Marion Ravenwood. Because, as both of you have heard me prattle on, but people here haven't, being a young girl, I've only seen damsels in distress up until this moment. Here's this woman who is like literally saying, you're going to take me with you. I'm your partner. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to be, even if I do get captured, I'm going to figure out how to get my own ass out of it. And I like you and I want to be around you, but I don't need you to survive through this adventure. And that was like, as a small little girl, I was like, wow, here's somebody who's doing that. And I liked that she wasn't extremely pretty. Like, she was not a starlet who they cast to be Marion Ravenwood. She was, like, not there just to be eye candy. She was there to actually add some depth to what was happening during the course of the film. At least that's my perspective.
May I say that it's important people recognise that the first film gifts to us 5 archaeologists in 5 different roles, right? There's Dr. Henry Jones Jr., Indiana Jones.
Right.
That is the most obvious one. There's his nemesis, Dr. René Belloc, who is the employed by the Nazis, but is a freelancer, and he's a treasure hunter, and he's French.
Right.
And he is portrayed as the everything that Indiana Jones really is, but he's tried to distance himself from. So he's what Indiana Jones has been and could be if he doesn't find a way to differentiate himself. There's that we're not so different, you and I type, as he said in the film. So you've got those 2 seemingly key characters, but then you've also got 3 other really important archaeologists. You've got Dr. Marcus Brody, who obviously my life is modelled on, as a sort of museum archaeologist who doesn't go on the adventures, but he knows what he wants. He knows what he has, the actual expertise that Henry Jones Jr. doesn't really have. He has, well, he does, but he's got a different kind of archaeologist. He's a museum-based archaeologist. Then you've got Salah. You've got the indigenous archaeologist in the sense of Egypt. You've got an Egyptian, although played by John Rhys Davies, but let's not go there. But we've got an Egyptian digger who is also more than a digger, and you're shown that he is he is shown to be not just simply an organizer of men to do what colonial overseers tell him to do. He has the knowledge, he has the expertise, he has intelligence, he adapts, he's shown to be canny and work the system, right? And then, 5th and finally, Marion Ravenwood. Now, the 6th archaeologist you never meet is Abner Ravenwood, her father. Obviously, there's a backstory that obviously people have discussed as the archaeological fraternity, that is almost like a foreshadowing of the Me Too movement about the abuse in the archaeological and anthropological world of relationships with underage or women. This dynamic that Marion and Indy have. But let's not. We don't want to go there necessarily in this. But I do want to say that yes, Marion is absolutely integral as an archaeologist, a female archaeologist who's made her way because her dad's been off on digs, and she's come into this world, this mad colonial archaeological world. And, she's trying to negotiate it. So, yeah, I just wanted to sort of flag that point up. There's 5 key archaeologists in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark film. Yeah.
I think that is good. And I think that the way they set up their archetypes are very interesting. Because the very first scene we have with Marion is her out drinking somebody in her bar. We have Marcus, who we're first seen as him coming in to talk to Indy about, about the idol I had it in my hands, he's discussing, what he wants for his museum next. So I think they did a very good job in framing and setting up the way that we view these different archetypes through the lens of their specialties and their desire through archaeology and the archaeological record. What do you think? I mean,
sorry.
Howard and I are used to doing this. We have not had a third person in here ever.
No, see, this is the thing. I know you two are the talkers, and I'm not a talker, so, this is cool. It's fine.
You're the thinker, we're the babblers.
I have 8 pages of notes, but, it's fine. You two go ahead. I'll just be here. It's fine.
No. Hey, seriously, he took 8 pages of notes. I was like, he was like, I got this one, and then I got this one, and then I got this one. So,
but I have more
where,
like from my perspective, from a historical standpoint, where they got it wrong. That's most of what my notes are. Even though I am a staunch, diehard, forever Indiana Jones fan, I am critical to the core.
Yes, I mean,
you're here to look epic with your hat and hold notes, according to our comment section. That was going to be my question to both of you. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, where is 3 things that you think they got just unbelievably wrong that they could have done better with?
Raiders
and Nerd, we're gonna go to you first.
Who are you going to first?
You.
Why didn't he run the other way? Like,
oh,
you
with
got
the
this boulder
with the
and
giant
there's
boulder.
gravity involved. Just turn the other way. He had an opening. Like,
okay.
So this is where my criticism goes to logistics.
Yeah.
So, as we learn, and not everybody has seen it, I know I am definitely a minority in this. As we learn in the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, he's traveled all over the world, and he's always been part of this type of a world because he's an angsty little kid who gets himself in trouble all the time and has to figure it out, and he learns all this archaeological and historical stuff. He has all of this knowledge. Like, he knows to turn away when the Ark is opened and not look at it and, like, all of this stuff. Why does he not know how gravity works? How does he not know physics and, inertia and, like...
Adrenaline?
So, I blame Spielberg.
Do you feel that scene was simply there to kind of boost the idea of the urgency of the moment? And
obviously it is one of the most iconic scenes, as it has made it into every theme park attraction, every stage show. It's made its way into Halloween costumes with people, like, literally attaching boulders to themselves. It's ridiculous, but I love it.
And it's in our modern day parlance. How many times have we seen it, that very scene then turned around and used in parody and all kinds of things across the media genre? Mm-hmm. Okay, what's number 2 thing you think they got wrong in Raiders?
Let's see. I don't have much on Raiders.
Shall I say something? I don't know.
Indeed.
Look, Professor's chomping at the bit.
Well, I would say that obviously, from my funerary angle, I thought that the representation of mummies was dreadful in the Well of Souls. There's this random room next door with all these vertical mummies in various degrees of unwrapped, and I don't know what the heck that was about. The entire representation of the architecture and how you can just knock a pillar and it all falls down. I mean, it's just comic, isn't it? It's comic, but it's so fun. And it's like the architecture, what I think is about the first film plays with this idea the architecture is almost polystyrene. Everything's falling and crashing, and in both the South American intro and in Egypt, and it does. I can over intellectualize it and say it gives this sense of there is a permeability to these hidden structures that you can get in and out of them really easily, and just one quick rope and you're down, and that's. But it's the thing that all TV subsequently is played, that literally below the ground there are vast, empty, open, uncleared spaces. It's people who, I don't want to say it's childish, because people don't understand that archaeology, by the definition of being underground, it's not just all like caves and there's just a thin layer of earth on the top and you break through with a pick and suddenly, ooh, look, there's all this hidden architecture. And that's not how it works, folks, okay? But it creates a whole idea of the sort of chthonic of the beneath ground. There are, great architectures. It's fantasy. It's like Lord of the Rings or any other fantasy universe where there's great caves and Khazad-dûm and Moria. There's this idea of this vast spaces under our own feet and various other, fictional ideas of hollow earth and other ideas, history and pseudo-archaeology ideas. So it's lovely, it's fantasy, it's fun, but of course it's not like that. We don't just pick away. The only context where that's really happened in the archaeological world is tombs that have been sealed, and you are uncovering that tomb and you are removing the seal and entering into a space that's literally, and that's where the Howard Carter Tutankhamun scenario hits the imagination, and that's the overlap with the real world of archaeology, is the Egyptology, Howard Carter, and the idea of opening a previously sealed space, But I kind of love it. I hate it and love it at the same time. It's such an important aspect.
So where else do you feel like Raiders went wrong in its depiction of either archaeology?
Well, even as a kid, I thought it was ruined by bringing the supernatural into the equation at all. It could have been left. It could have been left. It could have been left mysterious.
It could have been left supernatural aspect because it's not supernatural. It's mythology.
Okay, you could have had enough allusion to a intervention by the Holy Spirit, if that's the idea, right? You could have done that in a so much more subtle way, like than literally. Now all the answers are dead. Why did Indiana Jones have to bother? Because they're all going to die anyway.
I'm going to give you a point of contention. First of all, it is not the Holy Spirit that is inside the Beit HaMikdash. It is the Shekinah, the divine presence of God. And of course, because Steven Spielberg is Jewish, he did pretty well in that respect. I have some bones to pick with him in the theological area because obviously he's trying to make a sensationalist movie and make archaeology, like I said, he's trying to make Indiana Jones the rock star of archaeologists.
What was he? Okay, well, let me put a practical point to the nerdsheds will appreciate. What was Indy actually planning to do with that grenade launcher? I mean, what was he planning to do?
I have no idea.
It's a great standoff. Let them go. And Belloff goes, yeah, all right, kill us then. It's so dumb. It doesn't make any sense. So there's things like that where you think there's such a flow of dynamics. He gets onto the submarine. Yeah, right, he's with them. He's going to follow. And it's like, what's he going to do now he's there? Is he going to ambush them? No, he's behind them with a grenade launcher. And I just couldn't get my head around that at all. So that was one of the things that really hurt me.
Funny point with that. That scene inspired a scene in National Treasure with Nicolas Cage.
I've kind of blotted that out, to be honest.
When they're in you'll remember this, Rabbi. When they're in the ship, and he says, he's holding the flare, and he says, let him go. Or that scene was inspired by the rocket launcher.
No way. Okay,
yeah,
so
obviously,
the
damned if you do, damned if you don't standoff.
Yeah, so Nerd and I also are huge National Treasure aficionados, and
we need to talk about this.
Of course,
I've joined this live, and now I'm revealed of this. This is.
Oh! Okay, so
see, but at this point, we have to steal it to save it.
We do.
Yeah.
And I will say, from a theological standpoint, that is the other thing that I was completely enamored with Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it seemed to me to very seamlessly intermingle the idea of natural archaeology and the natural known world with this idea of Jewish mysticism and Jewish mythology in a way that did not, to me, make fun of Jewish mythology, because a lot of times you can go just a little too much and then it's almost a parody. It's almost mocking itself. And I feel like Raiders did a really good job of showing that Indy wanted to save the Ark because he knew how important it was to make sure that it was, preserved and not opened, but to be left alone. And then you have these other guys, and it's historically accurate that the SS had an entire team devoted to trying to find, psychic links, extraterrestrial objects to try and further the war effort, because Hitler believed in these kind of esoteric items that could help him possibly win his war. So he was nuttier than a fruitcake. But for me to watch that happen and see the way that they portrayed it, and in Jewish myth, we have a belief, and ties it together. We have a belief that during Yom Kippur, the priests would come and they do the priestly symbol, this is where that comes from Star Trek, is the priestly symbol. And we are all to cover our eyes because we believe when the priests are reciting this, the Shekinah comes over us. And if we were to open our eyes, our faces would melt off. So the moment where the Beit HaMikdash is opened, and Indy is like, shut your eyes, and whatever you do, do not open them, it's because he would have to have that mythological knowledge to know, or the knowledge of mythology, Jewish mythology, to say, hey, the Jewish mystics believe if you see this, your face is going to melt off. Leonard Nimoy talks about it in discussing Star Trek, how he came up with that. He said when he was a child in temple, every Yom Kippur, his dad would say, you have to lower your face. And the way he would say it is funny to me, because he'd be like, my dad would be like, listen, if you look up, your face is going to melt off. And they literally use that visual for Raiders of the Lost Ark. You see their faces melting off. So as a Jewish kid, I'm like, oh yeah, don't look. Your face is going to melt off. But I thought as I got older and I was rewatching the films, I also found it a really interesting way to introduce small children to mythology and adventure and make my own faith not seem so, because we're kind of dry. Let's be honest. On the surface, Judaism is a pretty dry faith. We go every Friday, we pray, we drink some wine, we go home. So, a lot of kids are not interested in that. So here was a way to weave these two kind of stories together. This story of adventure, this story of preserving archaeological record, and punching Nazis in the face. Who doesn't want to do that? Along with the idea of showing that Jewish mysticism and Jewish mythology is pretty damn cool. So, being a Jewish kid, I was like, y'all love Indiana Jones but hate me? What's up with that? Like... Sorry, that was my rant. But where it does get it wrong, and I don't know if Spielberg did this on purpose, because in Torah, the Beit HaMikdash is described in great detail of how it is supposed to look, and obviously it doesn't look like that in the film. But I don't know if Spielberg did that as a way to show respect to the Jewish people, his own people, and say, hey, I'm not going to completely... make this the way it looks in Torah, because a lot of times cinema does that, where it changes words and prayers and stuff to be respectful to whatever people they are trying to create the prayer. Or if it was just he didn't have the budget and said, forget it, we're just going to go with what we got. No one's going to look up close anyway. And
so question,
okay, I'm done.
In the Torah, is it as embellished as it is in the movie? Is it like...
It's more so. So
okay.
The tops have the cherubs, but they're kind of sitting this way, and it's a whole thing. And not with their wings out. It's, so I don't know if it was just because it looked better on camera, or if it's something that he was just trying to be respectful of his own faith. But I don't know. Raiders has a very soft spot in my heart, just because it, of course, is the first one I ever saw. But, there's plenty of places inside there that I feel like they get sort of the mythology wrong of other things. Like when we go right back to the beginning and the idol and the whole, I don't know if they were supposed to be Mayan or Aztec there, or, at the beginning. But I'm like, you kind of make these tribal people look as if they have no understanding of the world around them. These are warrior class people, and you're making them seem like it was just easy for people to sneak up on them. So I always had kind of an issue with that beginning. Thank you. Of course you would know that, because you're an anthropologist and I'm just a schmuck. Okay, so
from a student perspective, when he drops down and finds the Ark, not even a second to take a mental note of anything else in that chamber. Not even a second. It's just, oh, there it is, pretty, run to it. And like that is a continuing theme that we're going to see throughout the franchise.
Also, please.
I mean, the whole point is it's a simplification of what archaeologists in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century, antiquarians, late antiquarians, they were destroying stuff. They were raiding, they were pillaging. And it's simplified, but it's basically doing that articulating that point that they're ripping things out of context. And I suppose, but the thing I would say that is positive about Indiana Jones is that for all his action, he's not a good fighter. He's a useless puncher. He can't ride a horse properly. He can't do any of these things. But the one thing he does know at the end of the whole film is he knows to shut his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's intelligence, it's knowledge. It's not necessarily belief or faith, but it's knowledge that makes him a hero. And in that regard, there's a connection to Doctor Who. There's a connection to other sort of semi-spiritual adventurers, detective adventurers, in that it's knowledge, not their skill or at fighting or using a whip
Exactly.
or firing a gun or waving a rocket launcher, which I think is almost, you could make a justification that his ability to engage militarily is so inept and so childish. You might as well have had Marcus Brody there. That his only skill is knowledge of the ancient world and his ability to have an edge. So when his rival sees glory and power, he's manipulating the ritual. The Nazis don't see anything because they're supposed to be utterly nihilistic, and they just see a tool, a war machine that they can use. Indy realizes that they can get through this through a simple act of recognition of. So I don't know. I suppose at the end of the day, he's not a great fighter. He's not a great adventurer. He gets caught catching all the time. He loses his way. He can't follow which basket to chase in the middle of Cairo. It's supposed to be comedy. He's supposed to be inept. He's incompetent, but not in an English-eccentric, endearing way like Marcus Brody is. He's incompetent in an American colonial way, but he does have knowledge. And then you realise a lot of that knowledge is from his dad in film 3. But, he does have that ability. He is engaged with those cultures. He may be ransacking those cultures, but he is engaged with them. That's his kind of saving grace, if you see what I mean.
I would like to kind of jump off that point you made, because I do think one of the underlying themes of Indiana Jones is exactly what you said. Not that all of this adventuring is the thing that saves the day, but the ability to be educated in something is what ends up saving him and saving Marion. And ultimately, when we get into the other films, it's the knowledge there too. It isn't, like you said, it isn't him being able to punch somebody, shoot somebody. It's his education. And I think that is something like we take into our daily lives. I tell my children all of the time, because it was imparted to me from my own father, is that one of the only things that people can never take from you is your education. You could be someone who ends up homeless on the street, but no one can take the education that you have had. And I think showing that his ability to have this education and his knowledge, as you said, is ultimately the thing that saves him and saves the people who he's trying to save with him. Like you said, not that he's able to beat up people, shoot people, use his whip. All of that is cute effect, but it's ultimately his brain that gets them out of the situations they find themselves in.
It's a sliver of Buster Keaton about the whole films, which I think makes them so appealing. It's not like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, and nothing works. He's always almost about to be run down by a truck. He's always just about to be crushed by an aeroplane, or splattered by an aeroplane. It's this happenstance that makes Indy such a great action character, but also.
Do you both feel he's also a little bit bumbling in the scene with the dates?
Bumbling. That's what,
those dates have been poisoned, and he's just kind of sitting there, and we're all kind of on our edge. Is he gonna eat it? I mean, ultimately, we know he's not going to, because it wouldn't move the plot along. But it's that almost like he does things almost without thinking, because he's off in his own world thinking about archaeology. I know someone like that.
I wonder who that could be.
There is a sort of, and he's not really in the classroom properly. He's a shit teacher. I mean, he's shown to be an abysmal teacher. You can't even draw a plan on a board. I mean, he's trash. His classes are as dry as dust, and that's the point. Is he's a bad teacher. He can't do his work. I know archaeologists like this as well, not me. But
Oh
you know,
no, no,
he's a
I know. I've
Of
seen
course.
your classes. You're a great teacher.
but he's not gonna. No one's gonna sit in that class unless that for other reasons, maybe I don't know. But but my point is, it's
Well,
nothing. There's
they
nothing.
point out why people are in that class. He's got mainly 90% women in that class. They're not there to learn archaeology. As much as I'd like to think that the women are there to learn
Yeah,
archaeology, they're not. They're there because he's supposed to be, I guess,
yeah.
handsome or whatever. I never found
He's,
Harrison Ford to be attractive, so that was just
but
never a thing for me.
he makes the most interesting topic boring in class, and he can't convey that. And that's the juxtaposition: is he's got that adventuring side, but he's not conveying anything into the classroom. Whereas obviously some of the best archaeology teachers I know who do the field work are then in the classroom conveying what they found, what they're doing, and he's keeping it all secret. He's a very selfish, you know, pompous and poor teacher, because what he's doing is he's going, Marcus, he's suddenly going, I had it in my hand. He's telling Marcus, but he's not telling the students
But he
anything
can't
about
turn
what he's
around.
doing. You
Okay,
know,
so then my next question to both of you is, where does Raiders get it right?
Uh,
If anywhere.
so they did get it right in that the tribe that he encounters first, they did name it properly, and they did exist in the area that it was proposed to be. And
Okay.
Hitler's occult squad, they got that right. Yeah, that's about it for me.
I suppose
So
the
for
very
you,
things they
it's
get wrong
just
But
are
the
I can
also,
tribe.
go in depth on the occult squad though.
I mean, yes, I think the point is the things they get wrong are also the things that are right. That the roots of archaeology, and even into the mid 20th century, were did have that adventuring, raiding element, that competition between countries. It's more of a 19th century thing, but they're pushing it into the mid, right up to the 30s. That there is the occult angle, the Arnhem and SS were up to this shit, as well as they're blending together a lot of stuff, but they were into that stuff. Obviously, I've been trained by British and German archaeologists, so I have a sort of knowledge of both sides. And we're talking only two generations of archaeologists back, as I've discussed before. Any archaeologist with a European training is either trained by a mixture or one or the other of the archaeologists that were doing this stuff for the Nazis and went through re-education or retraining after the war, or those people who had their stuff stolen by the Nazis if they were in occupied Europe. So the Arnhem were like with panzer divisions trying to get into museums across Eastern Europe as the Germans advanced. This is not made up stuff. They were there. They weren't necessarily there in the 30s in Egypt. Of course, that's a fantasy. But the idea is that you're dealing with. You do get that vibe that the Germans are playing the colonial game, aren't they? That it could have been in 1890 as opposed to 1935. Is it supposed to be 35, 36? They could be
35 because oh no, 1936, because the next one is in 1935, a year earlier. So yeah.
Yeah. But my point is, it's this idea of competing European nations. And I thought that was all it was not accurate, but it's appropriate. It gives sheds a light on a trope that was there, that competitive plundering for different political and intellectual motives.
So for those who are in the comment section, I actually did put a poll up. Which is your favorite indie film? At the end of our live here, we will find out which one wins. But my question is, because we're going to have to move to our next one, is to sum up for Raiders, for both of you, what is your takeaway that you have from Raiders that you would like to impart to anybody's here when they're going to watch these films as in modern context?
They're fun. Just take them for what they are. They're movies. They're not documentaries. That's it.
I don't know. I think they're a documentary.
I think that's right. I would agree with that. I think there's amazing how people get very confused about this. And I think it may be because people have such shallow depth of understanding that in the 80s they were intended to be. It's not as if people in the 80s thought this is the way things were in the 30s. So this was already a very carefully staged, blundering caricature, but it was meant to be, it's an adventure film. And it with a spiritual spin. It's nothing to do with real world archaeology, but it does capture, the difference I'm saying, but it does capture some of the sites and monuments. They put effort to put in Turkdene near Hazleton, where he's showing them badly drawn Neolithic tomb. He is explaining about Skara Brae. You have Tanis as a city which is being investigated. You have it's playing off those colonial and imperial dynamics of the late 19th, early 20th century, shifting into the mid 20th century archaeological project as part of, plundering other nations, plundering other peoples. So I think that is captured. That is captured, and that was intentionally captured because that's what was actually happening.
I love it. For me, I think the takeaway is exactly a couple of things: that not to take itself so seriously, that the movie itself doesn't take itself so seriously. So when you're watching these, not to take it so seriously, but also to understand, as both of you have pointed out, that the theme of it isn't that adventure and punching is going to be the thing that saves you, but moreover, probably your brain is going to be the thing that keeps you from, making mistakes, or at least saving you in the end. That's kind of what I took away from it, even as a kid. So the next one, of course, is Temple of Doom. While Temple of Doom is the second movie, it happens the year before we get into Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I have a great deal of feelings in regard to Temple of Doom as a theologian, especially because Hinduism was one of my most favorite subjects when I was in college. So the way that Hinduism is portrayed in this movie, and Nerd has heard me say it every time we've watched it, makes me really angry. Really angry. The way that they're portrayed, the portrayal of Shiva, the way they portray Kali Ma, the way that they even portray the Thuggies, which, while the Thuggies is where we get the term thug from, and the Thuggies were a band of thugs under the British Raj, may or may not have actually been worshippers of Kali Ma to begin with. This is something that Nerd and I were talking about last night, and something I was not aware of until Nerd brought it to my attention. So the misconceptions about the Hindu faith makes me angry, especially coming from a director who is a part of what would be considered a marginalized faith. He turns around and then miscategorizes, misrepresents, misinforms, and people take away from that and believe that this is what Hinduism actually is. Okay, and I'm going to get off my soapbox and
so you liked
please,
it, in
some
other
opening.
words.
I mean, I actually do like the film. I just have issues with Willie Scott, which you both have heard me talk about ad nauseum, and the portrayal of Hinduism in this next film. So I'm gonna for a second, and please, some opening salvos about your feelings on Temple of Doom.
Holy with the racism. That's the summary of this movie. As a kid, it was my favorite. It is my absolute favorite. It was the one I would watch over and over and over again. But as an adult, I'm like, oh wow, no, not good, not good. It's still a good movie, but it was inappropriate for its time, and it just has continued to age badly.
I think that's the point, is it was not good at the time. They stripped down. So we had 5 archaeologists in the first film with that broader colonial pre-Second World War foreshadowing of the Nazis and their horrors. All that's taken out, and it goes into the romance of adventuring with one archaeologist. The Chinese scene introduction in Shanghai was the best thing about the film, but it was already deeply, even as a kid, I remember thinking, my God, I had Chinese kids, Chinese ethnicity kids in my year. I've known Chinese ethnicity kids since the age of 5. Literally down my road. And I wasn't in a particularly high ethnic minority area, in terms of the UK. But it's not. This caricature was just so cringe. Even as a kid, I was going. I was when I was age 12, 13. I was going. Oh, it's a bit naff. This is a bit lame. And the woman, and the what's her name?
Willie Scott.
Yeah, that I was difficult to watch as a child, actually, so I have to say I was, and then the racism, the South Asian as well as the East Asian racism was just abominable. But of course, the British turn up at the end to sort it all out. Hurrah!
Yeah. When I tell you, and as somebody mentioned in the comments, Vertiger mentioned in the comments, the ethnic food, the way that they use Ke Huy Quan as, they just call him Short Round. Now, of course, everybody knows the line, Dr. Jones, no time for love. And it's cute, but, they are really leaning into these stereotypes. Yes. We go from having Marion Ravenwood, who is a strong archaeologist, as you pointed out, in her own right, to Willie Scott, who screams at everything, turns her nose up at everything. They're in this village. She's offered food. She doesn't even have the respect. She's just looking at it and has to be told. Has to be told that's more food than this village probably has for all of them, and you are saying no to it, and you're being disrespectful, and yet somehow Indy, pardon my French, is going to still think with his dick and be like, well, she's female, so always.
But what was really interesting about that, even when I watched it for the first time, I thought there was going to be an arc of redemption for her, that she would come out of it. She would kick ass somewhere along the way. She would learn. She's got to be less snobby. Like many a film where the posh, hyper feminine woman realizes she's going to get a bit dirty and she's going to have to kick some ass and bash a saucepan into someone's face, as Marion does. She goes through that. I mean, Marion's already there, and she can do the glamorous, but then she can do the. But no, it doesn't go anywhere. It just, at the end, it's just like, right, we're back to civilization now. We're off on the elephant, and it's just like, it's terrible.
Steven Spielberg can do it. We saw Steven Spielberg be able to write women like this when we just turn around and look at the Jurassic Park franchise. All we have to do is look at Spielberg's Jurassic Park to know that he has been able to write women who may have started out fluffy but do have that redemption arc. We see it in Jurassic World. We see it in the original Jurassic Park trilogy. But here's Willie Scott, and she's just screaming her way through the movie. Now, I also agree, I don't like bugs. But, you see two people who are about to be crushed to death, and she's too worried about some centipedes. Put your hand in there. And when I'll be honest, one of my favorite scenes is exactly him putting his fist in there and shaking his fist. Do it now. There's going to be 2 dead people in here. Baby.
It's only a little sort of tree stick insect, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, as Nerdshed said, the racism is outstanding. The scene where they're eating ethnic food, they're all sitting down to eat, people are opening up scarabs. Nerd pointed out something to me yesterday, and I'm going to push it over to Nerd, about the food that was really upsetting for me, but we talked about it last night, actually, while we were getting ready for this.
Well, the primary thing with, insects and things. There are more cultures that eat insects as a source of protein and calories than not. It is a very normal thing. And, of course, our society is ugh, that's gross. Huh. But that comes from a place of privilege. And, to have, I don't know, the snake surprise and the monkey brains,
that almost seemed like poking.
That's falling into a trope of, look at these people and how weird they are.
Exactly.
The thuggy. While
I suppose.
Is... Yeah. No, go ahead, Professor.
No, go on. I was just thinking of.
While there is some speculation that they are a made-up people by the British to boost their own accomplishments. There's more evidence that they did exist, but they did not perform human sacrifice. And so to add here's this people who we have a real name for because they were around not that long ago, who are sacrificing people and eating monkey brains and forcing other people to eat monkey brains. It's another bit of colonialism and the othering of different cultures because they're not the white norm that Hollywood wants to see. So we have to make them look lesser.
This brings me to a question about Short Round. Do you think because the plot line involved child slavery, they felt they needed to have a child character as part of the main setup cast to show the difference between how these children were being treated? I often wonder, in looking at the movie now through the lens of an adult, we see that one of the plot lines is all of these children who have been taken from their local villages and being made to mine. And then we have Short Round, who Indy adopted, yet we never see again. We never see this kid again, yet Indy adopted this kid. Do you think that the possibility exists? These are in my notes. These are my conversation. Is that Short Round is there to garner sympathy, to say the juxtaposition between the child slavery and a child who suddenly is adopted. And furthermore, why is this white man adopting a Chinese child off the streets rather than finding them culturally appropriate family to go and be with? Because he isn't a great father figure. He has this kid driving a getaway car. It's not like he is the best father figure for Short Round. And Short Round loves him. We see that later on when he said, you're my best friend, I love you. But I often wonder if it's just a way so that they could get one kid to punch another kid in the face. And don't get me wrong, that was a little satisfying as a kid to see Short Round just like hit the Raj right in the face. But I was also kind of a kid, so.
I mean, if we think about the archaeology and how it's represented, in the first film you are seeing competition between European archaeologists and American archaeologists to plunder the rest of the world, with the Nazis as an enemy that everyone can share a common, the empire might be bad, America might be bad, but at least we're not Nazis, right? So you got that. Then you look at the actual think for a second, regardless of all that stuff, think about what's happening in Temple of Doom. The introductory scene is Jones is in Shanghai exchanging items with a crime boss, right? But he's not. Think about what he's exchanging. He's trying to acquire diamonds in exchange for the cremated remains of the first emperor of the Manchu dynasty. I mean,
it's like he lost the plot.
There's no way you can make that anything other than the most vile repugnant. And that he has acquired that, so he's got Short Round and all his little poor people from the streets of Shanghai to tomb raid to get this, to sell it for diamonds. Is that? Am I missed something here? I mean, how is that anything other than the bad guy? Not just a bit of a bad guy, an ultimate, there's sugarcoating that. That is just the most grotesque colonial, structured behavior.
It's like he left his ethics at home that day. He just said, I don't need these to come with me. While I'm getting dressed, I'll pack my whip, I'll pack my hat, but my ethics are going to stay at the office. Marcus
Brody, who remember by the third film fourth film gets a statue. Marcus Brody has sent Jones to Shanghai to literally plunder a Chinese emperor's tomb. But somehow, the other guy's got it. To get these jewels, and to get the jewels, he plunders a tomb. You can't. I mean, I know it's only fiction. It's a bit of fun, but there's not even an attempt to make that okay. There's not even an attempt to and then you go to India, and he's literally smashing up a temple. The only good thing about the film in terms of archaeological content is the line where Willie Scott says, archaeologists are funny little men looking for their mummies, and he says mummies. As a reply. So that's the only funny bit. Is this idea of archaeologists are funny, which is probably true, looking for their mummies.
I remember seeing this movie and thinking, why would he do that? Exactly. The very first scene is, you're an archaeologist. Why would you then be looking for wealth when the treasure would be the remains of this emperor? Wouldn't that be the thing that you're trying to locate, not these diamonds? And then we have a fuck ton of white saviorship. Here's this village, this very poor village. They've lost the thing that is their connection to their gods, the stone. And they've asked now this white man they've never met, just a random white guy comes wandering into their village. And they're like, oh, you're going to go free our children and bring back the stone. And I'm like, this is such white saviorship. As an adult, as a kid, it's a great adventure. And, they're pulling the air on the life raft and hitting the snow, and all of that is very cool when you're a kid. But looking at it as an adult, and then as we know, my feelings on the way they portray Kali Ma, and for the audience, Kali Ma is never portrayed the way that they have in that temple. She is portrayed with the dual arms, sometimes painted blue, sometimes, painted in black. Her tongue is out in red, and the reason her tongue is out in red is because at one point her husband Shiva, he disguises himself and comes to talk to her, and she embarrasses herself in front of her husband. And so to show her embarrassment, she bit her tongue, and so her tongue is often portrayed as being out. She, in the movie, is only portrayed as the goddess of death and destruction and despair, but in Hinduism, she is the mother goddess because she is also the balance: death, destruction, despair, home, hearth, and happiness. So they're gross mischaracterization, and then the use of that to create this blood cult that literally they're making you drink the blood of Kali Ma to almost induce a hypnotic state so they can control you. As we see, here comes the high priest who's ripping out hearts, and and everybody's, just in this obedience, including the Raj, who, as we find out later, had been given the blood of Kali Ma. It is completely disgusting to see as an adult, and especially as a theologian, the way that they portray Hinduism to the broader audience. Because even though we know it's fiction, how many people are going to watch this movie and think this is exactly what Hindus who worship Kali and Shiva do? Okay.
Exactly, and that's what
Someone's
I was
cat likes your voice,
the
Rabbi.
mischaracterization of culture.
I'm sorry? I missed one of you.
Me or Professor, because we were both talking. So, go ahead, Professor.
Okay. No, I missed what you said, nerd.
I said that's what I was touching on earlier with the mischaracterization of culture.
Yeah,
It's that
exactly.
You come in with this lens of they're already odd and different and weird, and then you carry that, especially if you see this as a child.
Hand it to me.
You then move on, go, oh, this is what these people are like. Well, that's weird.
Yep,
Even though
exactly.
It's grossly inaccurate.
Do you think either one of you, there's any point of this movie that gets it right in terms of history or archaeology? Professor?
I wouldn't say right, but I think it is a positive dimension of it. If you wanted some saving grace, is at the end of the day, Indy doesn't plunder anything on camera. There's the Chinese Shanghai backstory, which is horrific, but he is repatriating to the village. So at one level, if you wanted to spin it, and I'm not saying I'm saying if you wanted to find a saving grace, at least he's trying to save the sacred stone for the village. Okay, that's just one thing I'm trying to cook up something to be positive about. That he's not, rather than just the Nazis get killed and he loses the treasure, the Ark of the Covenant. Here, he actually makes the conscious decision of returning it. But I think that's not good enough. That's not enough to save the film and the narrative.
What do you think? Oh, and I'm sorry. You next, nerd.
Give me a second.
Notes. 8 pages of notes. When the three of us got together and said we're going to do this live together, the excitement, I don't know about you two. Turn that down, please, a little bit. The excitement that I felt as being able to do this with both of you was palpable. And of course, Nerd was just like, yes, let's do this. It was so exciting. So, a little more, or take it over there. Then take it over there. No. Honey, I need to be able to work.
Yeah, it's too loud,
turn it down a little more. Yeah, it's too loud. Even your potato says so.
I'm Professor Potato, by the way.
Yes, Professor Potato.
Professor Potato, get it right. She will correct you.
Yes, and as somebody points out in the comments, Indy didn't even have to be in the movies for the same outcome to happen.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So do you feel like there's any place, Nerd, that it gets it right?
I mean, they got they got the name of the Chinese chieftain right, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the end of that one, like, even though it is, to me now as an adult, it is the worst one. And I can definitely absolutely see now the things that Spielberg was going through when he made this one. And so he was going through a divorce when he made this one, and he knows it's the worst one.
Yes, he was. In fact, he ended up marrying Kate Capshaw, Willie Scott.
So he made the next one as an apology for Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
So, like,
I think
definitely see that that's why it took a darker theme.
But okay.
I do think the end of this one should have been the lesson. No, it doesn't belong in a museum. No, it doesn't belong in your curio at home. It belongs with the people it belongs to.
Okay, so that I agree with. But I have to ask, and this is just for personal, what do you two think was the reason why he came away? Do you think it could be I'm sorry, let me try again. Originally, Amy Irving was slated to play Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Of course, as we know, they started having issues going through a divorce, so they chose who played Marion in the movie. Now, in Temple of Doom, Kate Capshaw plays Willie Scott, who, by the way, Spielberg married. So for me, I often wonder what made him come away from this strong archetype female that he did with Marion Ravenwood and bring in Willie Scott. Do you think there was an overreaching reasoning from stepping away from someone who could take care of themselves into the screaming, I can't do it because there's bugs, or, oh, look at this pretty jewels, I want this, or I can't eat any of this food because it doesn't look like a McDonald's cheeseburger? I know, no McDonald's at the time, but you get my point. Do you think there was a reason why he came away from Marion Ravenwood and we ended up with Willie Scott?
From a psychology perspective, I think obviously we don't know the inner workings of why that relationship had failed, but I think that probably had an influence.
That's a good point, because I noticed when we get into Crusade, we're back to a strong female archetype with Dr. Elsa. Suddenly, we no longer have this screaming, I'm afraid of everything. We're back to this woman who can hold her own, who, in fact, turns out to be the villain. And I would like to say, are we ready for my personal favorite, which is, of course, The Last Crusade? How do we feel? Are we doing good here?
Yep.
I'm good.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, The Last Crusade is my personal favorite of every one of them. And I rewatched Crystal Skull recently. I'd only seen it one time, but I have always been a theologian. My connection to lost, like, artifacts that are considered holy has always been huge for me. So the idea that they go on the hunt for the Grail was like all encompassing for me. I was 13 when that came out, and when I tell you I wanted Henry Jones Sr.'s diary so bad as a kid, I remember watching this movie over and over and thinking to myself, what would that be like to have compiled all of this? And I remember them, him thumbing through it and all the pictures he had drawn and all of everything, and how just unbelievably into it I was. So we're back, though, to where we see a young Indiana Jones. The very opening scene of this is this young Indiana Jones, how we find out he gets his hat and his scar and, at first we find out he doesn't care about snakes, but then he's dumped into that big vat of big giant snakes, and suddenly, later on we find out why he's afraid of snakes is that very beginning, and we get introduced to his dad, who is also an archaeologist. So one thing I wanted to ask both of you is, what can we learn from this movie about familial relationships from the way that Indiana and Henry Jones Sr. interact? Yes, honey. Everybody sees your hands.
You want to tackle that there, Professor?
Well, I think that you learn that the two sides of his personality are there at inspiration. The looter, the tomb raider, the plunderer, the adventurer comes from one source, and his father, the detective, the antiquarian, the researcher, is the other source of inspiration, and it gives you the two sides, the Janus nature of Indiana Jones as potentially just like Belloc, just like another educated, but in the end just a dressed up looter, versus who's employed by rich people to steal objects for him or find objects to cross the Coronado. But he also knows what the object is. He cares about it, and it needs to be in a museum. So his moral compass is there too. And those two sides of the yin and yang, if you like, of Indiana Jones, are presented to you as an origin myth.
And of course, we get back to the Nazis. We're right back to Nazi occupation.
Yes.
And again, with Hitler's need to search out items. Well, and we think it's Hitler in this point, but it's not really Hitler who's looking for the Grail at this point. It's somebody who wants the Fountain of Youth, and is
so it's an American. It turns out to be an American.
Of course, It's always an American. I say this as an American. It's always us. We're always the bad guy. If it's not the butler, it's the American. Let's be real here. For when you two watch this movie, where do you think, in terms of archaeology and history, that Last Crusade gets it right?
Well, I suppose one could talk about that. The first film takes us on a journey from South America and then mainly to Egypt. The second film takes us to Italy, to Venice, to across the Alps. It takes us then to somewhere in Turkey or Jordan. It's not. I can't remember it. With Alexei Sayle playing a sheikh, isn't it? Is it Alexei Sayle? I think it is. He's good old Alexei Sayle. But there's a different dynamic of geography that fits into the Second World War is about to happen, and I think it does pick up much more accurately. I think that sense of the tensions around the Mediterranean in the pre-Second World War, mashing up with the history of the Crusades, and routes on the Crusader trails towards Constantinople and then to the Holy Land. So I suppose, but that's as far as it gets anything right. I mean, he just destroys the Venetian catacomb and blows it up, shooting all the people defending it, who we end up finding out are the good guys, blowing them up on boats.
Yes.
They're under.
Thank you.
He rips up a
dump out
medieval
the human
Christian
remains.
tomb. But where he gets it right, I suppose, is the representation of that medieval grave slab is pretty okay. I mean, general terms. So I think it was quite okay. The evidence, I've given it in my blog I did last summer. I gave it a 6 out of 10 for evidence portrayal, which is the best I think I gave any of them. So in terms of, it gives that sense of catacombs and tombs, and then of course it actually uses the site of Alcanza of Petra as its filming location, and in that regard, it for the first time you properly are introduced to a archaeological funerary site that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Jordanian desert. And you get a Nabatean and sort of desert city. You do get actually an archaeological site integrated into the storyline properly. So that's more about filming location than actually the plot. But I think it does capture that sort of that dynamic.
What about you, Nerd? When you watch this, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. But for you, Nerd, where do you think it gets it right?
I would agree. Like the portrayal of the catacombs and its use of filming location. Like, as an adult, this is my favorite one, just because I like the flow of this one better than all the others.
I do too. Yeah.
I mean, it's an Indiana Jones film, so it gets a lot wrong, so it's really hard to just pinpoint.
Wait, what gets right?
It's my monk bear. Someone's asking in the comments. It's my monk bear.
Oh, yes.
But, like, we recently rewatched all of these through.
Yes.
And you heard the screech that came out of me when he turned over that tomb.
Yes. Yes. And for me, I feel like in some ways the ways that it gets it right is I do believe that the way that it respects, and I'm saying this as a Jew, the way that it respects Christian mythology instead of making fun of it is huge, because Steven Spielberg could have used this opportunity to poke light at Christianity, to make fun of it. I feel like his use of basically Knights Templar, because let's be honest, that was what he was alluding to with the protectors of the Grail. He was kind of alluding to the idea of the Knights Templar. I think he could have easily made fun of it, and rather than, I feel like he brought kind of a depth to the idea of ancient Christian mythology, as well as man's deep need to seek out the Grail. The Grail is like one of the things that people have yearned for, ached for, searched for, written about over and over, and even alluded to. Like, if we look into, there's a book I read in college, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and it surmises that the Grail was not in fact a cup, but Mary Magdalene herself. That it was Mary Magdalene who was the actual Holy Grail, and there's a whole thing about the Merovingians, and where Dan Brown got his inspiration to write about the Da Vinci Code. So I feel that Spielberg did a really good job weaving the idea of ancient Christian myth in a respectful way that he could have, he could have easily poked fun at. And yes, my brother has a good point going back to Raiders. The Kohan garments that the archaeologist wear, I can't even say that word today. When he's trying to get ready to open the ark, is correct adjacent. Again, like we talked about the Beis HaMikdash, that's something Nerd and I talked about when I'm like, okay, so the Ephlets would be up here. There would be some other things, which is talked about in the Torah, but I digress. In the ways for me that now we're going to get into where it went wrong is literally his willingness to destroy things in pursuit of whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Starting right at that library, he's just like, oh, well, X marks the spot. And he's just got to, like, you can't, he just starts
ridiculous.
breaking into things. He just kind of does whatever he wants. You know, he completely, as you mentioned, he ends up destroying the whole tomb. You know, yes, I get that they flip it over so he and Elsa can survive, but he ends up destroying, like, archaeological record, which is exactly the opposite of what he should be doing as an archaeologist. And then, of course, we have Elsa, you know, in here, and I feel like she is a better portrayal of strong femininity than, of course, Willie Scott was.
There's obviously back to 5, but possibly 6 archaeologists. You've got Salah back, but not really doing archaeology, but taking on a bit of a... That was the most frustrating role. His position in the movie isn't at all adequate and clear. Marcus Brody goes into the field, which is brilliant. No, thank you, Mike. The fish make love in it. Just a brilliant line of water. No, thank you.
So lost in his own museum, you say?
You've got Henry Jones Sr., obviously. You've got Indy, and you've got Elsa. But then you've also got Walter Donovan, who is at one level a Belloc, but another level he is a collector. He is the greatest evil of all. Are the rich people who want to own the world, who want to possess, and I think that is an important addition to the character. To the balance is we've never seen you had the Nazis trying to take the Grail and the French archaeologists working for them, the Ark of the Covenant in the first film, but here we've got the table. He wants the world beyond the Second World War. He wants to dominate. He is a proto-Trump. He's a proto, you know, whatever capitalist you want to see of the late 20th century, early 21st century. He's a man that wants to rule the world, and in like many a Bond villain, he's a proto-Bond villain, if you like, which is the same as proto-Trump. You know, it's someone who wants. If he's only about 40 years off some mad scheme to eradicate the planet, and like Drax in, which of the Bond films is that where he's Moonraker, isn't it? Yeah. You know, so you've got this kind of, he's like that, you know, he sees the Nazis as a fleeting thing. Beyond that, there's a world we can exploit. There's a world of capitalism so he's probably the best baddie in the sense that, and he's also knows his archaeology. He's done the research. He knows where he's sending he's leading the breadcrumbs. So in many ways, he is an archaeologist too, and the worst kind. You know, he's a collector. Mm-hmm. He's a Brody, and evil Brody. You know, without a museum, he wants his own. So and signs of world domination. So yeah, I kind of there's six archaeologists in different ways again, and so in that sense, I think it does portray not accurate characters, but accurate facets of archaeologists. A Nazi archaeologist, rather than just a French in the employ. An older, senior, fuddy-duddy professor who's actually interested in knowledge and you know, the adventurer, you know, and then the museum archaeologist, the digger, and the evil collector. So they're all facets of real-world archaeology in different ways.
Professor, there is a very good question, I think, directed at you. How do you feel about seeing a villainous archaeologist portrayed on screen?
I think it's great. I want to be an archaeo villain. I think I could do very well with it. You know, I've said this before. I said, but sir, the villagers need that well to drink for water. No, destroy it all. We must find the treasure. No, I could do that. I could do that role. I can imagine that. Just give me the money, and I'll do it. You know, I don't care.
That's the easy role. That's the easy.
No, seriously. I mean, exactly. I think it's an important.
That's it.
It's an important part of both the first and the third film, and this is important for people to understand. While it's all fiction, and it's all funny, and it's all silly, it portrays the role of archaeology in colonial, imperial, and European and American world domination aspirations. It's part of that project.
It's actually a little
and when I say colonial and imperial, because it's about it's empire building and the construction of identities for empire, but also nation building and the stories of nations. These are facets of the same thing, but happening abroad and at home. So and the colonial is beyond the territorial claims, but into the domination economically, culturally. So these are nested levels of the same thing. So American archaeology in most of the 20th century, well, still is in the 21st century, is still imperial, colonial, and nationalistic, all mixed up. British archaeology is nationalistic, colonial, and imperial, but with less imperial now, but still with the. So we're different. It's changed, but we're both doing these things. The French are just as bad. My point, and of course the Nazis embody one of the worst abuses. But if anyone's in this comments, if anyone's a student of history of archaeology and thinks the Nazis are an aberration, you're delusional. The Nazis are just one example of what was happening all over, of the use of archaeological research, plundering, extraction of cultural knowledge to bolster a particular vision of past, to support present, to forge future. And yes, the Nazis are often say, "Oh, that was an aberration. Look how archaeology can be abused." And I see this we talk about this all the time on TikTok. Oh, look, we're the good heathens, or we're the good X, but there's these nasty people who steal our stuff. No, we're all part of the same horrid mix. I'm not saying we're as bad. I'm saying, but we can't say, oh, we're the good guys. We're the ones that turn up, and we're maybe imperial, but we've got nicer moustaches and we've got British accents, so we're okay. It's all part of the project. It's important that we have an Indy and we have an Elsa, that we have a Belloc, and we have these are part of who we are as an identity, as a discipline. So I'm sorry.
I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you.
I'm not celebrating that. If there's anyone in the comments who doesn't know me, I'm not trying to sort of do a smug.
No.
So isn't this great, or some kind of weird sort of what's that annoying American dick? He's on the rent-a-mouth, but Peterson. I'm not sort of Jordan Peterson. And this is the way we should be. I'm saying this is the horror. This is the horror of the legacy of the history of the subject that we've got to counter and contend with. So even in our fiction, it's been noticed. It's not. This is the 80s, but it's been well recognised, and that wasn't the first time. People were aware of the archaeology doing this since the 30s, since 20. People were aware of this. This is not as if, we've only just realised since we've all become woke and post-colonial. No, people have been aware of this role of archaeology in the very periods in which it was happening. They were aware of how it was being manipulated. The Nazis were doing it. Everyone else was doing it. And that's why I think it's really important. That's the educational aspect of these fictional fun films, is they do show some truth, some deeper truth beyond the characters.
I think what happens is that we want to see ourselves in black and white. We want to see there's the good guys and there's the villains. There's the heroes and there's the villains, and neither. But Indy shows us that we are all gray areas. It is literally about what we are willing to do, the compromises we're willing to make to meet our end goals. And if those end goals are, what we think is what justifies the means. The end justifies the means. And as the professor is saying, none of us are free from having blood on our hands when it comes to like this type of thing. He talks a lot about, the people who want to point fingers. We want to point fingers. No, it was Christianity that did us all wrong. It was because Rome did us all wrong. It was because, Jews did us all wrong. I say this as a Jew. There's a lot of fingers to be pointed, and disregarding the fact that we're all coming from the same place. We have all had a hand in oppression. We've all had a hand in imperialism. We've all had a hand in nationalism. We've all had a hand in colonialism. Very few people can say that they have not benefited from it or participated in it, especially in 2023. Every one of us have had a hand in it. But what happens is, and what these films bring to light is exactly what you're saying, is it shows the gray areas. Indy is neither a good person nor is he a bad person. He is a person who has an end, and he is justifying his means to get to that end. He is not the hero. He's portrayed as the hero, but he is not the hero. He is just a person who wants something and is willing to go and compromise his ideals, his ethics. Like we said earlier, he left his ethics at home. Like when he wanted those diamonds, he was like, I'm not going to bring you along on this trip today. So I feel that we want to see Indiana Jones. We want to applaud the hero, and we forget that he is not the hero. I don't even know, Pops, if he's an anti-hero or as much as he's just human. And in his humanization, he sees his end goal and is willing to do what it takes to get to his end goal. And I think that kind of describes most people in the world. We are doing the best we can with what we have. And some of us are like, I'm going to have to compromise here. I'm going to have to compromise there to get to what I'm getting at. Now, for me, Crusade has so many layers to it that makes it my favorite. Sean Connery, once again playing Sean Connery. Because how is it that Indiana Jones has an American accent, but his dad is Scottish? But that's, and has lived in America for as long as he has and has never, but Sean Connery has never, he's never been anything but Sean Connery. But some of the lines that they have together show the dynamic so well between a child and their parent, especially a parent that they feel has abandoned them, has disregarded their feelings, has minimized them over the years, and has basically left them to their own devices. I'm as human as the next man. Dad, I was the next man. Like that line is probably one of my most favorites in the entire movie. I'm as human as the next man. Dad, I was the next man. Showing that one, Henry Sr. is still a man. He's still a person just as much as his son is. His son kind of sees him as this almost distant characterization of a person, not necessarily an actual person, until he realizes, my dad is not just my dad. He's a human. And how many of us have gone through that very thing, myself included? I was 27 years old when I figured out my parents were not just my parents, that they had their own lives and their own dreams and their own aspirations and their own goals. I feel like
I've heard about this. Parents don't do have dreams, and what are you talking about?
I feel that their relationship in this film kind of highlights the realization that a child has that their father is not just their father, but a whole human unto himself. And also the realization that for Henry Sr. to see that Junior is not living in his shadow and is a capable human being. And I feel that the moment we see that is when he recognizes his chosen name. He's reaching for the grail. Dad, I can get it. Dad, I can get it. Junior, give me your hand. Give me your hand. And then he's like, Indiana, let it go. I think it's that moment that Senior realizes my son is a capable man, and he's not a 13-year-old kid that I have to tell to go do the dishes or to, go study his Latin or anything like that. So that one layer for me is that their complicated relationship throughout this particular movie. Of course, I love to see any movie that portrays Nazis getting punched. I'm always here for Nazis getting punched. And of course, at the end of the day, are you okay?
What was that?
There's a weird noise happening. It was
I
like a...
I know.
It's like a...
It's not someone's gift makes a noise, an audio gift, or something weird.
Maybe.
Maybe the aliens, because it's coming onto the fourth film. Maybe it's the aliens are trying to communicate.
It could be aliens. Okay. So for me, Crusade, and of course the Holy Grail. Like, I was obsessed with the Holy Grail. I like the way they portray it. I like that, of course, you see Indy saying that would be the cup of a carpenter. That whole thing he has to go through. Only the penitent man will pass. And of course, but in ancient, Jehovah spelled with an I. All that, I remember seeing that in the theater going, they're going to mess this up. And it is about a leap of faith for Indy as well. He is an archaeologist who believes, even though he's seen the extraordinary, we see him around the Beis HaMikdash. Here he is. He still has to take an additional leap of faith to believe that, one, the Grail exists and it's going to do what it's supposed to. So, like, those are like levels of this movie to me that make it my absolute favorite. And of course, I'm always down when I see a Knights Templar, because again, that was another part of my theological studies that I was really into, was studying about the Knights Templar and the whole bit. So this 700-year-old man, like, getting ready to try and fight Indy, and he's like too old to barely even lift his sword, and he's like, you know what, you vanquished me, just do what you got to do. And it brings up these feelings of, like, you see him at the gate, just like kind of waving him off, like, my work here is done. And yes, oh my God, I get goosebumps every time. Okay, so I'm going to shut up now, because I could literally talk about this particular film probably alone for hours, because it's...
You are.
the way I feel about it. And of course, Marcus in the field is hilarious. And some of his lines get me too. And when he's like, Henry, the pen is mightier than the sword. Okay, I'm just gonna be quiet now. And then of course Elsa, like, she's the villain. I love that. I'm here for an evil lady. I but I don't think she understood. I think she was driven, and to find the Grail. And then here she is. I don't know why she said, and Donovan's an idiot. For all of his collecting, he has no idea that jeweled cup would not be the cup of a carpenter. And I'm just like, you don't... he's just like, that's the cup of a king. Well, Jesus wasn't king at that time. Okay. One of you say something, because otherwise I'm just going to keep going.
Well, maybe we could move on to the fourth film then.
Oh, yes, let's do it. Aliens. Ancient Aliens. I've only seen this twice, when it first came out, and then this week.
I've got a reveal for you, so you keep going about it, and you start off if you want. So Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And the only reason I saw it this week is because Nerd had never seen it. And so, to be a completist, I said,
come on, Nerd has to start then. Nerd has to start with first impressions.
Yes. First impressions of Crystal Skull. And hold on a minute, let me get comfortable, and let me make the face. Hold on, ready? Aliens.
I loved it and hated it. So I loved it. Yeah. I loved the storyline that didn't involve the temple. Everything beyond the temple I loved. But the temple, it's falling into the ancient aliens trope. And from an anthropological perspective, it's fucking disgusting. Like in the other films, yes, it was like, there's all of these, and I'm sorry, supernatural things surrounding these religious relics. But this was, they're only smart and can do that because it was the aliens. I like it, but I made me so mad.
I could attest to that. I was with him when we watched it, and he was just like, "What is happening?"
I liked it though, and I think
really good. I thought you might hate it.
It's the least problematic from a modern sense.
Yes.
But then they just had to go and double down with the ancient civilizations couldn't do things for themselves, so it was aliens.
I thought there was in my Archaeodeath review, I gave this highest points because apart from the KGB agents crashing their car into Marcus Brody's statue, they don't plunder the tombs in the Nazca Plain.
Right.
They actually don't take things from the tomb. They actually are looking to repatriate the objects, and they're El Dorado, they're fantasy, even the fantasy, scenario, Amazonian, society. Yes, there's what the heck are these natives doing there, hanging around waiting to assassinate people? I mean, it doesn't make sense. But then, what should we do for the next 1,000 years? Because we've abandoned this site. Well, we won't abandon it. We'll just hang around, hiding, in case someone rocks up, so we can kill them.
Mhm.
But then, why don't we just stay here then and keep going with the civilization? No, we're not going to keep going with the civilization. We're going to literally abandon it, but then hide in the walls. You go, so of course none of it makes any sense, but and why, but then also everyone's, and the Russians are, I mean, it's Kate Blanchett. I mean, there's no criticizing, but you've got multiple archaeologists here. You've got Indiana Jones, you've got Harold Oxley, played by John Hurt, you've got Jim Broadbent, who apparently I look like, who plays Charles Stanforth, the stand-in Marcus Brody as the museum archaeologist. You've got Ray Winston. Is he an archaeologist or not? Let's say no, but he's an adventurer.
I think he's a treasure hunter.
Treasure hunter.
I think he's a treasure hunter, yeah.
Then you've got Mutt Williams, who is almost like it's in his blood to be an archaeologist, but he's not really an archaeologist, but he provides the action side. But then is Irina Spalko also a archaeologist? She's kind of a psycho-scientist who believes in mind control and stuff, but she's a bit
which
of an...
was huge in the 50s and 60s for the Russians.
Yeah.
Huge.
And Marion Ravenwood is a retired archaeologist who never... So she plays what happens to you if you leave archaeology behind. You actually become a normal person. There's a way out, which is kind of hopeful for me. But beyond that, it's got lots of archaeological characters. It's not, again, just back to indie, and that's important to remember. But I actually gave it better marks because of the ethical arc that Nurched mentioned. That it's actually it's ludicrous. It's Ancient Aliens, but then why is Ancient Aliens any worse than discovering the Ark of the Covenant? Well, obviously I'm going to get bashed for saying that, but what I mean, in terms of, because Ancient Aliens is a late 20th century religion, right? Ancient Aliens is a quasi-religion. It's a kind of has a religious-like devotion to it.
Right.
I'm not trying to denigrate any organized religion or any faith, but it is people who go down that route through literature. It is a kind of faith. You want there to be. I want to believe. I want to. It's Mulder and Scully. It's Mulder, isn't it? It's the same thing. There is a truth out there, and the truth is that people were here in ancient times who taught us all we know. And it's just deeply racist and a repackaging of 19th century white supremacist ideas. And we always talk about that. But we've got to understand that it's a religious faith. A faith
I
of
will
non-faith.
agree with you there. Especially given the time that this came out. There were so many people in the early to late 90s who believed the year 2000 we were going to see aliens come back. There were whole cults devoted to the idea of religious devotion to these aliens that are going to reapproach and come back and rule us again. So you will get no pushback from me about the idea that this ancient alien is a quasi-religious belief system, because it is.
Can I defend the film in one regard then? They don't come back and save. They blow up her brain and sod off. Right, so I know it's an ancient alien plot. I know it's a ridiculous ancient alien plot, but the ancient aliens couldn't give a flying fart about the Russians and their communist, their commie plot to try and Indiana Jones has gone full McCarthyist, hard right, hasn't he, at this point? And he's saying, but the aliens just couldn't give a flying fart about any of them. They're just like, thanks guys, we're off, bye bye.
I do.
I like that. I think that's almost a joke. I wonder whether people got that joke. I think it was intended as a joke, and I just don't think it properly worked. But I think it was a bit of a, the aliens going, we don't care who you are. And that's actually played. If you want to criticize that film, you've got to criticize Ridley Scott and his bullshit Prometheus film, where the aliens are just the same, and that's all based on archaeology too. And I enjoyed it, but there's nonsense plot. Sorry,
I haven't seen that one.
I didn't like Prometheus, and I didn't like Prometheus.
archaeological dig on Earth reveals ancient symbols linking to a far off, and it's the alien backstory. And they go off on a ship and they find the ancient civilization, and they think, oh, gods who will be excited to meet their children, and the gods go, and you find out are just real assholes and just have made these aliens to destroy humans because they think it all went wrong, so they're wiping the slate clean. That's my understanding of the storyline. Anyway, that doesn't matter because I'm going on track.
Days where I'm kind of on that train.
With this one, I feel like this is the only movie that we see Indy do actual education. They're stuck in that bog-like substance, and he's trying to explain to Mutt what it is. So we actually see him teach. I know it's one of your favorite scenes. It's when they come through the library on that motorcycle, and that his student is asking him questions, and he's like, no, and get out of the library. Those are a couple of moments where, yes, Gordon Child, where he actually shows that he has the acumen to be a teacher, and maybe it's between Crusade and Crystal Skull that he has learned how to be a better educator in the classroom, because he's slowed down and he's not going on as many adventures as he did in his youth, that maybe he has learned how to be a better educator. We do see a much more mix of gender in his classroom during Crystal Skull than we do in any of the previous movies. So, and of course he's now an older, probably tenured professor, and girls are not like looking at him the way they did when, he was young professor. I mean, I'm sure there still are some, but my point is that it looks like he's kind of grown into his ability to actually teach in this movie more than he had been shown to his ability in previous movies. And I do think that I did not mind the plot of Mutt Williams. I did not mind it at all. I think that people didn't like it because of who portrayed Mutt Williams. I think if it had been a different actor, people would have liked that plot line more. But because Shia LaBeouf in his life has had some issues, it has translated into the roles he takes. People are suddenly want to be dismissive of the role. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they're going to do or what they're going to say about this Mutt Williams character in the upcoming Dial of Destiny that comes out in June. How are they going to address that? Because like Short Round, I hope they don't just leave it empty. Because now here we are. We have 2 films. Short Round has never been mentioned again. It's like he's just gone off into the ether. And for me, that's frustrating for many reasons, not least of which is the fact that Ke Huy Quan could have been called by Steven Spielberg at any time to come back and play Short Round, and I would have loved to see an older Short Round maybe also go into archaeology or even take a different discipline, and maybe even at some point be at odds with the way that Indy has done his job over the years. That would have been a very satisfying plot for me. So I really hope that the same thing does not happen with Mutt. I would like to see that full circle and at least have a kind of satisfying wrap up to the idea of Mutt in the upcoming movie. I actually did not dislike it. I thought it was fun. I did not like the ancient aliens.
No, I didn't like it either.
You two are going to have to talk amongst yourself for just a moment. I have to help a tiny tater.
So it tends to the wee one.
Did you? How did it, from an American perspective, how was that take of the politics of the 1950s? I felt was a bit hackneyed. I mean, was that just me?
It wasn't a little bit, but it wasn't too far off. I mean, we've never been the good guys.
No.
But Yeah.
I mean, it's trying to capture all those 1950s cliches, like
It did.
nuclear
It
bomb tests.
absolutely did. Right
It's
up to
trying to.
calling mud a greaser. Yeah.
So it is a deliberate. It knows it's being silly, doesn't it?
Yeah. No.
I like that part of it. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely not my least favorite. As we know, that's Temple of Doom. But and John Hurt, no matter what he does a phenomenal job. So him just running around like his brain is filled with, nonsense.
Well, that's the Alien link, isn't it? He was in the first Alien film, so that's why.
Yeah, that's right. He was. I loved it. I did not. Watching it the second time, I liked it more. I do feel like even myself watching it the first time in the theaters, I did have some biases about the idea that here's Shia LaBeouf playing his son, and is he going to pass the reins on, which was the original plot device, is the reins were supposed to go on to Indy's kid, who was then going to take over, but nobody wanted to see Shia LaBeouf play, Indiana Jones Jr. They want to. And yes, and a Doctor Who link, because we know that John Hurt also was the War Doctor, so there is a little bit there too.
He's in everything. Is there anything he's not in?
I was going to say something so snarky. I was going to say something terrible.
I know, that's why I said something. That's why I said something.
I appreciate you. So, obviously we've seen, are there any other points we want to hit about Crystal Skull?
No, there's a lot less loot and scoot in this one, which is, admirable, I suppose. But yeah, definitely the whole point of it is put it back where it came from, and
put that thing back where you got it. Yeah,
put
that thing back where you got it, or so help me.
You're welcome.
So I have a question. Have both of you seen the trailer for Dial of Destiny? If we could make some predictions, I personally think it's going to be about time travel. I think they're going to use this dial as a way to introduce time travel into the Indiana Jones universe. And I want to get your predictions about what could the plot possibly be for something called the Dial of Destiny. And will it again involve Nazis?
Of course it's going to.
Okay, so it's going to involve Nazis. It's going to involve two key time periods. Firstly, it's going to involve immediately post Last Crusade, and then a jump to the 70s, isn't it? Is that the idea?
60s. It's the 60s, early 60s.
50s into 60s or 50s into 70s. I don't know. But anyway, it's going to have a jump within that. And I don't know how it's going to play out. I have no idea. I haven't looked at any of the information about it other than it's got Indiana Jones in it. And that's about all I care about. But yeah, it's got those Germans are up to no good. You got, in their Nazi form, as usual. We're not so different, you and I. It's like, the lines like that. And of course, you've got Mads is the baddie, isn't he? Danish actor Mads Mikkelsen. Casino Royale,
it's going to be beautiful.
Valhalla Rising, and so many other things, and Rogue One.
And as someone pointed out in the comments, it's possible that we're going to have a Back to the Future meets Indiana Jones. I love that Phoebe Waller is going to be in it. I love her as an actress, so I'm excited to see what she brings to this next movie. I have a lot of hope that it's going to be good. I really would love to see Marion again, because of course, as we know, she's my favorite. I know that Shia LaBeouf is not making an appearance, so I hope their explanation of what happened with him. I personally would also love to see them do something with Ke Huy Quan, but as we know, I'm probably not going to get that at all, and then I'll just be angry about that. Currently, Ducky, you can go to YouTube. You'll be able to find the newest trailer for it. If you, both of you, because I am a cinema freak, what is your favorite line from any of the movies? Do you have one? Do you have one that when you think of Indiana Jones, you're just like, that's the first thing that comes to mind?
Other
Well,
than snakes.
I have the one about the I've got a bad feeling about this. Gets used, doesn't it, from Star Wars? It gets transferred over, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Or am I misremembering
Yes, it
that?
does.
But we have that.
No, you're exactly
We
correct.
have the snakes. We also have the X never marks the spot, which is what archaeologists always use. You got the line about if you want truth, it's down the corridor. I can't remember the exact quotes, but I always use that.
Oh, yeah, at
We have,
philosophy department. If you want truth, you
yeah,
can go down here
your
to
truth is
professor in the
possibly,
philosophy department.
we're after facts. Archaeology is
Archaeology
the
is
sacred fact.
70% research.
We've also got the line about Gordon Child. He's a field man, which is obviously a classic archaeological nod, the first nod to a real British/Australian archaeologist, and the most influential archaeologist, the greatest archaeologist of the 20th century, many would say, V. Gordon Child. You've also got the other one I like is Sad Little Men Looking for Their Mummies from the second film, which is a great one. And I'm trying to think. There's another line that I always like. I can't think what it is, but I think that's that. Yeah, there's a cluster of lines that I kind of like.
When I think of Indiana Jones, the very first line that comes to me is Henry Jones Jr. We named the dog Indiana. You're named after the dog. That is the number one, and then of course I liked that dog. That's
Maybe they need a
number one.
film spin-off about the dog.
Oh,
The
hold
Adventures
on.
of Indiana Jones.
What nerd? You said you have something about that.
Indiana Jones was originally named Indiana Smith because Indiana was the name of George Lucas's dog. But Spielberg didn't like the name Smith, so they settled on Jones.
That's very interesting. Also, for a couple
we named
of little...
the dog Indiana.
It's true. Oh, that's interesting. Let me also... Oh, go ahead.
If I can say something more broadly about the name Jones, of course, and I know I'm speaking to at least one other person of Welsh ancestry in this conversation. What is a travesty of American cinema and American television production is the treatment of the Welsh. Is that we from Davy Jones to Indiana Jones, they can't cast Welsh. The American audiences cannot understand Welsh accents. They won't. And, all the things I saw, for example, the Witcher Blood Origin series has a Welsh actor with a Welsh accent, and it's brilliant. It's such a joy. You've had Ewan Griffith play Dr. Fantastic, but he didn't have the Welsh accent to do it, but there's been moments where Welsh actors are very prominent in Hollywood but they don't get allowed to use them. Michael Sheen still can't do it. He's not allowed. He has to be British. He has to be posh English. It's they won't allow, and it's really, obviously I'm biased, but of all of the many controversies about representation, forget everything else. No, I'm joking. But it's an interesting dynamic. It would be lovely if Indiana. There was some. Just came to mind that I should say this so that people.
No, I think
thank you, Duffy. We should all love her. But Witch and Blood Orange. He doesn't have a big enough role, but one of the seven is a Welsh. Has a Welsh accent, and there's so much more that we should have of that. Of regional accents and local accents and variety of accents from these islands in. I haven't watched Downton Abbey, I must admit. But anyway,
that's because
I'm
you
just
don't
saying,
like posh English people.
Yes, you may fire when ready. It's the Peter Cushing. It's the default bad English baddie. Which is what I want I want to be the archaeology version of that. I want to be you may fire when ready. Sort of Death Star Alderaan. That's what I want to be. That's what I want to be. I don't want to be just grubbing around stealing artifacts. I want to be total world destruction archaeology. Not evil archaeologists. There is a lot of evil archaeologists out there in terms of fiction, but I think Welsh archaeologists we need more of, is what I'm saying.
Well, we have one right here.
Yay!
But would you be an evil Welsh archaeologist?
No. I suppose I
don't know.
I can't be.
I don't know. Maybe I think you might have it in you. Just at least for a walk-on role, you can say something terrible in the next Indiana Jones, and I often wonder, do we know? I'm sure one of you do. If they actually consulted with actual archaeologists while creating these movies,
I
or
don't
did
know.
they just kind of do?
Would it really have made any difference? Honestly, I think for the Last Crusade, they had a vague sense because they show the Nazca Plain, they show
Mhm.
sort of vaguely South American cultures in a generic sense. There's some effort, some basic effort has gone in there, isn't it? But really, I don't know. It's not. It's not. It's not. I mean, it doesn't need an archaeologist. There's nothing that needs an archaeologist. But then the Viking TV show apparently has historical consultants, and no, enough said.
Look how they did.
So for closing, I want to say, first of all, I had an amazing time. I always have a great time with you, Professor, and I actually liked having a third person to help make sure that I'm overrun, because
third
you
wheel.
are not a third wheel. I actually felt like it was fairly balanced, because we have three different disciplines trying to talk about this, and so I have to say, that was what I was going to ask, is how do you guys feel about us tackling the Mummy series as a trio, where we kind of go over where it gets it right and wrong in terms of archaeological
It's a
and
bit outside of my
mythology.
area, but happy to have a go. I don't know. It's not something
You love the Mummy. Let me
I
just
love it, but I
say,
don't know much about
I was going to.
Egyptology. But
Oh no, you might have to do some research. We know you hate that.
Imhotep.
You must not read from the book. Like, all I'm saying is, I think that, and possibly because I've never seen it, so I would be willing to watch Tomb Raider if this was something that, the face that Nerd just made.
I've seen the original two Angelina Jolie films, and they're brilliant. I will say nothing else.
See. So maybe, so what are we thinking, Nerd? We going to do some Mummy and some Tomb Raider?
I'll do it. I'm not going to be happy about having to watch them, but I'll do it.
So before we close, we tend to, at this point, kind of let anybody who has questions to wrap up before we wrap up. If anyone has any questions about any of the indie movies, if you have questions for our resident anthropologist undergrad or our archaeologist, or even the theologian, please let us know. We've actually done pretty good in terms of time-wise.
Yeah.
We are currently watching through the Young Adventures of Indiana Jones. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Professor.
No.
But yeah,
it was my actual inspiration to become an archaeologist. Not the movies.
Was the Young
the show.
Indiana Jones Adventures? Yeah. So, and I don't know. I'm going to be outnumbered. So, like, my spouse is an archeo, and then my BFF is an archeo. So I don't know, like, what. I'm just over here going, the Bible. Like,
The Bible.
Do you want to hear an Indiana Jones theory? And I use theory in the context of its layman terms.
Yes. I'll be right there, baby.
The theory is that Indy has split himself into two personalities, the academic and the adventurer, to find the conflict between what he wants to do in life and the abandonment of his father. So he has the sorry, Professor, the
persona.
Boring professor persona, and to counter that, to where he doesn't drive himself insane, becoming his father, he then has to go out on these adventures.
That's I find that interesting. I wouldn't say that the tenured professor role is boring.
These aren't my words. These are fandom words.
Fandom theories. Huh. That's very interesting. Now, Professor already said that it was not Indiana Jones that got him into archaeology, but you mentioned it is Indy that got you interested in archaeology. Now that you are an undergrad for archaeology, do you find the discrepancies between the way archaeology is portrayed in this franchise versus what you actually learned? How vast a difference is that for you?
It's vast, and it was before entering the realm of higher education, just because there's no way There would be way more archaeologists in the world if they were Indiana Jones.
And as somebody in our comments said, after getting my anthro degree, I found I didn't see as many tombs as I thought I would.
Oh, poor old toothy ichthyosaur.
How many pits of snakes though?
Yeah, well, there is that. That was going to be my question. But how many pits of snakes have you seen? And in your field research, Professor, have you come across any pits of snakes? Any rats, like large catacombs of rats?
I think metaphorically, yes. Most academic conferences are basically that.
Okay,
I'm not lying.
Okay. I just meant like in your field work, but yes.
No.
Like, have you? Yeah, like in Princess Bride, have you come across any rats of unusual size, bee colonies, large masses of spiders? Yeah,
I've had to contend with giant Swedish wasps once. I hit one with the monograph. It was coming at me. It was a huge mother of a hornet. It was coming at me, and I went ah! And it sort of knocked out of the window, and I slammed the window as it was coming at me. Oh, it was horrendous. I've fought rams, Randy rams. I've had to fight off. I've had to kick them in the head and punch them and swear at Swedish rams. I've had to fight cows. I've had to physically push cows into hedges. Have you ever pushed a cow into a hedge? I have. There's all sorts of stories. It's all going to come out. I've physically, not picked one up, but you push a cow so that your minibus can get past the lane. I've chased cows, been chased by cows, chased by bulls, chased bulls, faced off bulls, faced off all manner of wild animals. Well, not wild, perfectly. Bullocks are dangerous. They like to hang around near thick tombs. You've got to watch out for the bullocks, yeah. So all sorts of bovine adventures, caprine problems.
So what you're saying is you haven't fought snakes, but you punched a ram?
I punched rams. Yeah, you got to punch rams. I mean, not in a cruel way, but it was asking for it. It looked at me funny.
You got to punch rams.
What they do, you see, is that this ram anyway, they're trying to lock horns with you. You see, so it's like you can't create a distance. If you push back and there's a distance, it's going to charge you. So you've got to stay close to it and swear, because they know what swearing is, and punch it, because that's the way to keep it a bit confused until you can. I call it a strategic retreat out of the field, right? The ram wasn't hurt seriously. They've got very tough bodies. I'm such a weedy, I wouldn't be able to hurt it. Don't people think I'm mean about it? But if I'd run away or backed off, it would have gone, so there was no point. So I had to just, because I was looking at a Bronze Age burial mound, and there's this big, rather chunky sheep came at me, and I went, "Hello, chunky sheep, you're cute." And it came right up to me like this, side on, and I thought it just wanted a stroke. And I thought, it wants to be friendly. No, it was doing that to lock horns with me, to start. And I went, "Oh, you're cute. Now leave me alone. I'm just going to take a picture." And I turned around, take a picture, and heard this boom, 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 and I just jumped sideways. It went, "Oh!" And then I realised it wasn't a big chunky sheep. It was actually a ram, which is a kind of big chunky sheep, but with extra balls. And then I realised that I had a problem. Anyway, I don't know how we got onto this, but I'm just trying to give you a sense.
So the real archaeology,
and there are other people you do get encounter. I mean, I must say, I don't want to be malign any particular religion, but you've got to be wary of the clergy when you're visiting churches in various rural places, because they come out of nowhere. They do.
And they ram you as well.
They spent hours lurking between pews, hidden, and then you go into church, you look at the tomb, and they go, "Hello," and you go, "Ah!" So you've got to be careful of the, I'm mainly Anglicans when you're in my part of the world, but you have to be careful. They stealth. They're stealth. They're like a special sort of. I think they're probably special sort of blending tools.
Professor? JARP 1234 would like to know, in archaeology, when you're getting your degree, is there a ram fighting class you need to take?
JARP, you're never taught these things, yeah? It's a field skill. You'll never be taught.
We're sent out into the field underprepared.
Excavating with hangovers is another challenge. There's so many.
excavating with hangovers. I will say, as a member of the clergy, it is true that we do tend to just stare at you like this and then come at you wildly with our hands in the air. Hello!
Cake or death. Stealth vicarage ordination. It's true. It's true. There's all sorts of trying to avoid the weirdo conversation. There's always a village weirdo in every English. There's a village weirdo, and if you're excavating nearby, he'll loom over the hedge, and he'll come up to the excavation site and go, and you've got to sort of know how to handle him, because is he a friendly weirdo, or is he a violent weirdo, or is he a pack of dogs in his garage weirdo? There's all sorts of versions. You've got to be careful. So it's an unpredictable life. It's actually not very dangerous being an archaeologist, but you just got to keep your wits about you.
Seth says that they are the village weirdo where they live.
Well, they can be friendly ones, Seth. Seth's lovely, and I'm sure they haven't got a pack of rabid dogs in the garage weirdo. I'm sure they're a friendly weirdo.
I will say this has been an honor right up to the ram punching, but even that has been great.
I think that was the best part. I know that
a lot of people are used to the professor and I doing Doctor Who lives, which we will be back on. I have convinced a certain young person that they want to start watching Doctor Who, so I might be able to get them interested in oh yeah, look at that face. That is the face of someone who's very excited. You will see the professor and I talking Doctor Who again. They have both agreed that they will come and do the Mummy series with me, as well as Tomb Raider. So can I interrupt Ducky
saying about the Doctor Who live? Yes, we've done the Revive series 1 to 7, and we're on to series 8 next. We've put all the others onto Archaeodeath YouTube, and we're on to season 8.
Yes. That was exactly what I say. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Nerd.
Really quick. Nat Geo has a virtual exhibit of indie artifacts and things from the films next to actual historical artifacts to convey the difference. It is billed as an educational thing that Nat Geo did to be like, this isn't archaeology, but here, have some real archaeology. And that's available on the National Geographic website.
Oh, fantastic.
Also, to let everyone know who's watching, if you missed any parts of this, by tomorrow it should be up on the Archaeodeath YouTube page. Is there anything that either of you would like to plug besides the Nat Geo? In closing, have any thoughts that you wish to convey to our pretty good audience today? We had a lot of people who hung around with us. So, any parting words of wisdom?
Only trumpet. I've got a trumpet. There you are.
Ram fighting martial arts class recommendations. Do you have any?
Just swearing in English and punching Swedish rams. That's the only experience I've had. They didn't understand, but I did shout at it from the car the next day when I saw it in the field. It gave me a funny look then. I went, "Yeah, bastard!" I was driving past.
Okay.
It's probably dead by now. I'm still bitter about it.
They are now archaeology. Okay, so thank you for both
Sorry
of
for bringing down the tone.
No. This is awesome. Thank you guys for joining us again.
Thank you both. It's been fantastic. A real privilege.
You're going to find
this on. Thank you
for
inviting me. I had fun.
Well, we love to have you. And apparently now you're a permanent addition to our Archeo Talks. I will plug something. You will find it in my link tree. And yes, this has nothing absolutely at all to do with archaeology, but in my link tree, you're going to find a link to the Rainbow Railroad. In the United States right now, especially in Florida, they are passing more and more anti-trans bills. The Rainbow Railroad is there to help relocate and help support trans individuals who live in these states that are denying them access to health care. You're going to be able to find that link in my link tree. If you need help, they're there. If you can donate to help others, please do so. As always, if you see something that is of archaeological context, arrowheads, whatever, put that shit back where it came from, or so help me. If you're in the United States, we have a set of rules that say that you cannot, we have laws that are there. Please contact your local archaeologists, your local city before you start digging. Definitely do not keep them in your basement, in your bedroom.
Will have a
Yes.
Just basically, if you loot stuff, your face is going to melt off.
This is true. We've seen it
and you're
happen
gonna get
in real
videos made
Gonna
time.
about you on
happen.
TikTok.
Exactly. And also, please, if you are not following Archaeodeath, he has great content about the archaeological record, and just he's a funny individual. If you are not following Nurched and you like sassy people who tell people off, definitely that is somebody you want to follow. I appreciate everyone for showing up today. Again, you're going to see this on Archaeodeath's YouTube. And thank you guys for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.